August 19th, 1944. Wehrmacht Headquarters, East Prussia. General Oberst Alfred Jodl reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the collapsing Western Front. His staff had calculated the mathematics of Allied supply lines stretching over 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to Patton's spearheading Third Army. The conclusion was inescapable, rooted in decades of military experience and the hard lessons of the Eastern Front. The Americans have outrun their logistics. Patton will halt within days, perhaps hours. No army can sustain such advanced speeds without fuel. From his position at Hitler's Wolfschanze headquarters, Jodl analyzed what every German general understood from bitter experience. An armored division consumed 150,000 gallons of fuel daily when advancing. The Americans were now 400 miles from their supply depots. The calculation was irrefutable. Patton's Third Army would grind to a halt, giving the Wehrmacht time to regroup at the Seine, perhaps hold until winter. What Jodl didn't know was that 125 miles away, 5,958 trucks were already rolling eastward in an endless convoy, headlights blazing in direct defiance of military convention, transporting 12,500 tons of crucial supplies every 24 hours. The Red Ball Express, a logistics operation so bold that German military science had never deemed it feasible, was about to shatter every assumption about mechanized warfare. Within 72 hours, Patton's supposedly stalled tanks would smash through German positions at the Seine. Within a week, they would liberate Paris. Within a month, they would stand at the German border. The Wehrmacht's most accomplished military thinkers were about to receive a painful lesson in American logistics that would fundamentally redefine their understanding of modern conflict. This unprecedented effort was delivered by 23,000 truck drivers, 75% of them African American, who transformed a temporary one-way highway system into the most effective military supply line in history. The German General Staff's conviction in American logistical failure was rooted in years of military background and current observations. The Wehrmacht had pioneered the Blitzkrieg, revolutionized combined arms operations, and understood intimately the cruelty of extended supply lines. Their own offensives had repeatedly collapsed when logistics failed to match tactical triumph. In Russia, the Wehrmacht forward momentum stalled, not from Soviet opposition initially, but from the simple failure to supply troops across vast distances. German trucks frequently broke down on Russian roads. Horse-drawn wagons, still accounting for 80% of German military transport, could not match the speed of panzer spearheads. Different railway gauges meant supplies piled up far from the front. General der Panzertruppe, Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would command the 47th Panzer Corps from September 1944, had noted in July, the Americans face the same logistical impossibility we faced in Russia. Their mechanical advantage becomes a profound disadvantage. Machines demand fuel, ammunition, and parts. They have advanced 400 miles in 30 days. History teaches us what follows: paralysis. German intelligence carefully tracked American consumption rates. A single Sherman tank consumed 0.5 miles per gallon on roads. Far worse cross-country. An infantry division required 700 tons of provisions daily. An armored division needed 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions advancing on a 60-mile front. The arithmetic seemed irrefutable. 12,000 tons daily moved 400 miles from the beaches over damaged infrastructure through a transportation network the Germans had systematically destroyed during their retreat. General Major Siegfried Westphal, who became Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt in September, calculated on August 20th. Even if the Americans had unlimited trucks, which they do not, and perfect roads, which they do not, and zero mechanical failures, which is impossible, they still could not sustain Patton's advance for more than another 48 hours. Physical laws cannot be ignored, not even by American industry. At 2 p.m. on August 25, 1944, in a commandeered French chateau near Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Laurent Alberts of the Motor Transport Service faced a room of doubtful officers. The data they presented was grim. Patton's Third Army was consuming supplies faster than any army in military history, advancing at speeds that defied all standard logistical planning. Conventional supply methods, railway transport, scheduled convoys, depot distribution, had completely failed under the stress. "Gentlemen," Alberts announced, "we are going to establish a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches straight to the front lines. Every vehicle will operate 20 hours out of 24. No stopping except for essential fuel and emergencies. We will move 12,500 tons daily minimum." The name was derived from railway language. A Red Bull freight was an express shipment that took priority over everything else. The Red Bull Express would function on the identical principle: absolute priority, no interruptions, no exceptions. The operational guidelines defied German military doctrine. 2 parallel one-way roads, one for loaded trucks moving forward, one for empty trucks returning. 24-hour operations with headlights on, abandoning blackout discipline. A no-stop policy except for mechanical failures and refueling. 5-minute convoy spacing, keeping a 35-mile-per-hour average speed. Mobile repair units every 50 miles. Military police checkpoints removing any vehicle moving below 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commanding the advanced section of ADSET, reviewed the projected figures. "We need 140 truck companies, 5,958 vehicles minimum, operating at 90% availability. That's impossible by any logistics textbook ever written." Yet within 36 hours, the impossible was operational. On August 26, 1944, drivers from the 3,916th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, nicknamed the Deuce and a Half. Loaded with 105mm artillery shells destined for Patton's guns at Metz, 300 miles east. The makeup of the Red Bull Express would have shocked German racial theorists. Of the 23,000 people, drivers who would eventually work the route, roughly 75% were African American soldiers serving in a still segregated army. These men, who could not dine in white establishments or use white facilities across much of America, were keeping the most celebrated white general's army in motion. The drivers swiftly developed their own subculture. They painted slogans on their vehicles: "Patton's Blood Bank," "Hitler, Here We Come," "Detroit to Berlin Express." They established their own traffic rules. Slower vehicles pulled off immediately. Breakdowns were shoved into ditches. Any truck under 20 miles per hour was considered an obstacle. By August 28th, German reconnaissance units started reporting something unprecedented. Units from Panzerlehr 116 radioed from positions overlooking the main Red Bull route. Continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers. No spacing, no blackout discipline. Estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour. Americans have abandoned all military precaution. This violated every tenet of German military instruction. Headlights at night invited aerial attack. Continuous columns were perfect artillery targets. No space between vehicles meant one disabled truck could halt the entire column. Yet the Americans appeared unconcerned. General Lieutenant Edgar Feutinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express from hidden locations on August 30th. His report to Army Group B headquarters revealed growing dismay. The adversary operates a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without ceasing. They do not conceal themselves, do not disperse, do not adhere to any regulations we understand. It is not military science. It is mass production applied to warfare. What the Germans failed to grasp was that American logistics operated on entirely different principles. Where German doctrine stressed secrecy, Americans prioritized volume. Where Germans maintained vehicles, Americans anticipated 20% mechanical failure and planned accordingly. Where Germans obeyed rigid military procedure, Americans constantly improvised. The statistics achieved by the Red Ball Express shattered German calculations of logistical viability. The first week, August 25th to 31st, 1944, saw 89,939 tons of supplies delivered. Daily average, 12,848 tons. Round-trip distance, 686 miles. Vehicle rotations, 5,958 trucks making 1.5 trips daily. Logistics experts reviewed these figures from American papers and dismissed them as propaganda. But the numbers were authentic, and they were rising. The Red Ball Express produced hourly innovations as drivers and mechanics solved problems that German military science considered impossible to overcome. When trucks failed, approximately 1,800 daily, mobile maintenance units performed quick repairs on the roadside. Mechanics developed a triage method. 15 minutes to repair or push the truck off the road. Parts were scavenged from vehicles beyond immediate salvage. Engines were swapped in 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When the main Red Ball route became too congested, drivers created bypasses. They took over French buses to move personnel and free up trucks for cargo. They borrowed German vehicles, painting them olive drab and putting them into service. They constructed detours around destroyed bridges using debris from bombed buildings as roadbed. The Germans, watching this organized disorder, could not understand it. German logistics emphasized meticulous planning, strict maintenance schedules, and proper procedures. The Americans ignored every rule, yet their system sped up instead of collapsing. The most shocking revelation for German observers was American fuel management. The Red Ball Express used 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily, just for its own operations, more than many German armies received for all purposes. Yet fuel never ran out. The Americans had established a parallel wonder, Operation Pluto, pipelines under the ocean, laying fuel lines across the English Channel. By September 1944, fuel flowed through undetected underwater pipes. Forward fuel depots were set up every 25 miles along the Red Ball route. Tanker trucks ran their own parallel convoy system, guaranteeing no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for fuel. The Red Ball Express didn't just supply Patton's advance, it multiplied its speed exponentially. German military doctrine calculated that an armored division could sustain a 20 to 30-mile advance daily under optimal conditions. Patton's divisions, supplied by the Red Ball Express, averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1st, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in morning operations. Stopped for resupply at noon, Red Ball trucks were waiting with fuel and ammunition, and then advanced another 32 miles in the afternoon. This 67-mile single-day advance devastated German defensive planning, which assumed a maximum 30-mile daily advance. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, reviewing the reports in East Prussia, initially refused to accept them. No armored force can advance 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical failures alone prevented. This is propaganda or misidentification. But intercepted American radio communication validated the reports. More unsettling for German commanders, the Americans were openly broadcasting their locations without code, supremely confident in their capacity to move faster than the Germans could react. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had compiled detailed reports on the Red Ball Express. The implications were devastating for Wehrmacht strategy. Every assumption about American military ability required immediate re-evaluation. The report noted observations that defied German military science. Americans wasted vehicles lavishly, abandoning damaged trucks rather than spending time repairing them. Drivers operated on stimulants for days, ignoring every rule of personnel management. Zero camouflage discipline made the entire system vulnerable to air attack that never materialized. Mechanical failure rates of 30% daily were simply overwhelmed by redundancy. Fuel consumption that would bankrupt any European military was sustained effortlessly. Field Marshal Walter Model's reaction revealed mounting despair. If these reports are accurate, we face not a superior army, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they do not fear us. They waste resources because they have infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics. The Red Ball Express drivers paid a physical cost German observers couldn't see. Drivers operated for 72 consecutive hours, suffering hallucinations from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents killed 300 drivers during the Red Bull's operational period. Yet morale remained exceptionally high. These men, mostly African American, who were denied equal rights at home, understood they were making history. They were disproving Hitler's racial theories with every mile driven, every ton delivered. Captured German officers gave powerful evidence to the Red Ball Express's impact. Oberst Hans von Luck, taken prisoner in September 1944, told interrogators, "We knew we'd lost when we understood your supply system. You violate every rule, waste fuel, discard vehicles, exhaust drivers, yet succeed through sheer volume. You've industrialized warfare beyond our comprehension." The psychological impact on German forces was devastating. Wehrmacht soldiers could hear American trucks all night, every night. Endless motors, endless supplies. They had 3 rounds per rifle, while Americans were bringing millions of rounds. The sound itself became psychological warfare. American psychological warfare units recognized the impact. They began broadcasting truck engine sounds toward German lines when actual convoys weren't present. German units reported these phantom convoys as real, demonstrating the psychological damage the Red Ball Express had inflicted. The Red Ball Express consumed vehicles at rates that would have paralyzed any other military. By late September, mechanical attrition reached staggering proportions. Average vehicle life, 10,000 miles. Normal, 30,000. Daily deadline rate, 30% of all vehicles. Engines replaced, 500 weekly. Tires consumed, 10,000 weekly. Total vehicles destroyed or abandoned, 5,000 plus. Yet the operation never slowed. American production had anticipated such losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports, carrying hundreds of new trucks. Replacement drivers were trained in 2 days and thrown into convoys. German calculations showed Americans destroying more trucks weekly than the Wehrmacht possessed in France. Yet their transport capacity increased rather than decreased. They had achieved something Germans thought impossible: logistics faster than consumption. French civilians along the Red Ball route witnessed American abundance that contradicted years of German occupation scarcity. The psychological impact on occupied populations was immediate and profound. The Red Ball Express drivers, particularly African Americans, often shared their rations with French civilians despite regulations. Every stop, children would gather and drivers would give them chocolate, cigarettes, soap. The contrast with German occupation was stark. Americans gave away casually what Germans had rationed strictly. German intelligence reported the propaganda impact. French civilians now believe American victory inevitable. They cite the truck convoys as proof. Resistance activity has increased 400% along Red Ball routes. The population that accepted our occupation now actively opposes it. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its greatest challenge. Patton's Third Army had advanced so far that even the Red Ball struggled to maintain supply rates. The round trip now exceeded 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing. Vehicles were disintegrating. German intelligence detected the strain. General de Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel reported September 8th. American supply lines show signs of collapse. Convoy intervals have increased from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speed has decreased. This is our opportunity. But American adaptability again surprised the Germans. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized, created intermediate transfer points, cutting individual runs to 350 miles, implemented driver rotation systems, established forward maintenance bases, and doubled the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12th, tonnage delivery had actually increased. The crisis that should have halted Patton only made the system stronger. Supplementing the Red Ball Express, Americans implemented another logistics solution Germans deemed impossible: large-scale aerial supply. C-47 transport aircraft began delivering critical supplies directly to forward units, each aircraft carrying 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, Wehrmacht observers counted 900 transport flights in a single day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. The Luftwaffe, at its peak, had managed 300 tons daily to Stalingrad and considered that a maximum effort. The Americans used transport aircraft like trucks, no fighter escort concerns, no fuel limitations. They assumed losses and overwhelmed them with numbers. The Wehrmacht couldn't compete with this industrial arithmetic. The Red Ball Express operated under command principles that violated German military hierarchy. Junior officers made decisions reserved for generals in the Wehrmacht. Sergeants commanded operations larger than German colonels managed. This decentralization baffled German observers. American logistics operated without apparent central control. Every lieutenant acted like a general, every sergeant like a colonel. Chaos should have resulted. Instead, they achieved efficiency. The Wehrmacht couldn't match with rigid hierarchy. By October 1944, advancing railheads began to reduce Red Ball Express requirements. The operation that was supposed to last 10 days had continued for 82 days, delivering 412,000 tons of supplies, over 122 million ton-miles. German commanders, now fighting on their own borders, reflected on what they had witnessed. Field Marshal Model wrote in his final report, stating, "We were not defeated by American tanks or planes primarily. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express proved that in modern war, logistics is strategy. The winter of 1944 to 45 provided the Red Ball Express's ultimate test. Freezing rain, snow, and ice should have stopped wheeled transport. German doctrine stated wheeled logistics became impossible below -10 degrees Celsius. Yet the Red Ball Express continued. Drivers wrapped chains on tires, poured alcohol in radiators, and kept rolling. Speeds dropped from 35 to 15 miles per hour, but tonnage delivery continued. German observers reported ice-covered convoys moving through blizzards that had stopped panzer divisions. The Americans had created a logistics system that functioned regardless of weather, terrain, or enemy action. It wasn't elegant or efficient by German standards, but it was unstoppable. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were required to study Red Ball Express operations for historical records. Their conclusions were unanimous and devastating to German military pride. General der Infanterie Friedrich Schulz summarized: "The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never imagined. Americans created a temporary civilization. Thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, millions of tons of supplies that existed only to feed armies, then dissolved when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over years. They created superior temporary systems in days." The most insightful analysis came from General Heinz Guderian, father of German armored warfare. "We invented Blitzkrieg, but never solved its fundamental limitation: logistics. Americans solved it through industrial excess we deemed impossible. The Red Ball Express was not a supply line, but a flowing river of material that drowned our forces. The Red Ball Express cost the United States approximately $100 million in 1944. Vehicles destroyed, fuel consumed, roads damaged, French claims for compensation. German staff officers accustomed to managing scarcity found the figure incomprehensible, yet Americans considered it cheap. Reoperation enabled the capture of 400,000 German soldiers, the liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortened the war by an estimated 6 months. Each day of war cost America $250 million. The Red Ball Express paid for itself in a single day of shortened conflict. Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, commanding logistics for the European theater, stated, "We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France. In any previous war, that would be catastrophic losses. In American industrial war, it's acceptable overhead." An unexpected consequence of the Red Ball Express was the revolutionary impact on post-war civilian logistics. Thousands of drivers returned to America with experience operating the world's largest transportation network. These veterans founded trucking companies, designed interstate highways, and created the modern American logistics industry. Companies like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were started by Red Ball veterans who applied military logistics to civilian commerce. They had learned in France that volume beats efficiency, speed beats perfection, and if you can keep trucks rolling 24 hours, you can move the world. Military historians universally recognize the Red Ball Express as the decisive logistics operation of the European theater. Without it, Patton's advance stops, Paris falls weeks later, and German forces successfully establish winter defensive lines. The operation validated American military doctrine that emphasized logistics over tactics. While German officers studied Clausewitz and battlefield maneuver, Americans studied Detroit assembly lines and railroad timetables. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that in modern warfare, the ability to supply forces determines victory more than tactical brilliance. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, supreme German commander in the West, received comprehensive intelligence on the Red Ball Express. After studying the reports for hours, he summoned his staff. "Gentlemen," he announced, "we face something beyond military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that makes distance irrelevant. Our strategy assumed their culminating point, where advancing forces outrun supplies. That point doesn't exist. They have revolutionized warfare, and we are fighting the last war." His operations officer, Oberst Hans Speidel, suggested interdicting the Red Ball routes with the remaining Luftwaffe. Von Rundstedt's response revealed complete understanding. "With what shall we interdict? They have 6,000 trucks. If we destroy 1,000, which we cannot, they'll replace them in a week. We'd need to destroy 200 trucks daily just to match their production. We don't have 200 aircraft total." Behind the statistics were human stories that revealed American character to German observers. Drivers who hadn't slept for 3 days refusing relief because their trucks might not make it through. Mechanics working in freezing rain to keep convoys rolling. Teenagers lying about their age to drive trucks. Such stories multiplied throughout the operation, creating a mythology that demoralized German forces. The Americans were not soft as propaganda claimed. They drove themselves harder than Germans drove horses, but they did it voluntarily, not from fear. This made them more dangerous than German doctrine had understood. In November 1944, with rail lines partially restored, the Red Ball Express was officially discontinued, but its methods had revolutionized military logistics permanently. The concept of continuous, high-volume, wasteful but effective supply became American military doctrine. The final innovation was the speed of dissolution. The massive operation, 23,000 men, 6,000 vehicles, hundreds of installations, disappeared in 72 hours. Troops reassigned, vehicles redistributed, routes returned to civilian use. Germans required months to create smaller operations and years to dissolve them. Americans built what they needed, used it, discarded it, and built something better. When German generals surrendered in May 1945, many cited the Red Ball Express specifically as demonstrating the hopelessness of continued resistance. General der Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel stated at his interrogation, "When we understood your logistics capacity, we knew the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them." The Red Ball Express was a weapon against which we had no defense. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. Among Germany's most competent commanders, was asked what most surprised him about American forces. His answer? Not your tanks, not your planes, but your trucks. The Red Ball Express showed us that you had militarized your entire society's production capacity. We were fighting your factories, not just your soldiers. The final statistics of the Red Ball Express stand as testament to American industrial warfare. Total cargo delivered, 412,193 tons. Total distance covered, 122 million ton-miles. Trucks employed, 5,958 daily average, 7,000 peak. Drivers involved, 23,000 total. Operating days, 82. Fuel consumed, 57 million gallons. Tires worn out, 180,000. Vehicles destroyed, 5,000 plus. Cost, $100 million. German divisions defeated through supply advantage, 47. Estimated war days shortened. 180. These numbers represent the moment when warfare changed forever, when industrial capacity became more important than tactical brilliance, when logistics determined strategy rather than serving it. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express. The ceremony recognized the operation that had been overshadowed by combat operations, but proved equally decisive in Allied victory. Veterans who attended spoke of their pride in an operation that proved American industrial might and individual determination could overcome any obstacle. They had driven through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. They were black soldiers mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition during the war, but they had delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is not support, it is the main effort. The operation demonstrated that industrial democracy could mobilize resources on a scale that totalitarian efficiency couldn't match. German generals who had laughed at American logistics were silenced by 6,000 trucks delivering 12,500 tons daily across 700 miles of liberated France. They had assumed Americans would follow European precedent, conserve resources, advance cautiously. Instead, Americans created a logistics tsunami that drowned German forces in Allied abundance. The operation's success came not from military genius, but from American characteristics Germans never understood: industrial excess, mechanical aptitude, improvisational skill, and most importantly, the initiative of individual soldiers who made independent decisions that in the Wehrmacht would require field marshal approval. In his memoirs, General George S. Patton, whose Third Army was the primary beneficiary of the Red Ball Express, wrote the ultimate tribute. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserved as much credit for the defeat of Germany as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers, mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition. But they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. That truth stands as the final testament to the Red Ball Express. 23,000, mostly African-American drivers, operating 6,000 trucks on a one-way highway to victory, achieved what German military science declared impossible. They supplied advancing armies faster than physics should allow, maintained tempo beyond human endurance, and proved that in modern warfare, the side with the most trucks beats the side with the best tactics. The German generals had laughed at American logistics, dismissing it as wasteful, undisciplined, impossible to sustain. 82 days later, those same generals surrendered to armies supplied by the Red Ball Express, finally understanding that American trucks had defeated German tanks, that industrial abundance had overwhelmed military excellence, that logistics had become strategy. The Red Ball Express ended on November 16, 1944, but its impact echoed through military history. It proved that in the industrial age, victory belongs not to the bravest soldiers or brightest generals, but to the nation that can deliver the most supplies, the fastest, the farthest. The German generals who laughed at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender documents in May 1945. Defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who revolutionized warfare at 35 miles per hour. Their story deserves its place among the great military operations of history. Not because it was elegant or efficient. It was neither. But because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton rolling, kept the Germans retreating, and proved that in modern war, the convoy of trucks matters more than the column of tanks. The highways of France still bear the scars of the Red Ball Express. Ruts worn by overloaded trucks, bridges hastily repaired, roadsides littered with abandoned vehicles. But the greatest monument to the operation is the speed of Allied victory. Every day the war shortened, saved thousands of lives. The Red Ball Express shortened it by months. In the end, the German generals who laughed at American logistics learned the hardest lesson of modern warfare. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, and Americans talk trucks. The Red Ball Express was America talking very loudly indeed, in the roar of 6,000 engines that never stopped, carrying democracy and destruction at 35 miles per hour down a one-way road to victory. The last word belongs to a German officer whose name is lost to history, quoted by a Red Ball driver at the 1994 commemoration. Standing beside a road in Belgium, watching the endless convoy of American trucks, the officer said in accented English to his captors, "We prepared for everything. Your tanks, your planes, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks. How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer rolled past him at 5-minute intervals, driven by exhausted Americans who were rewriting the rules of warfare, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express had made logistics into strategy, supply into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. The German generals stopped laughing when they understood this truth, but by then, Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history.